Hello, everyone. Welcome to Front Row Seat. I have a very special guest today. His name is Nathan Rehm, and we met through Tom Campbell and the MBT. I met Nathan through some interactions on the fireside chat that we had had. I'd done some fireside chat work where Tom comes and we get to ask questions about what we're doing. And Nathan and I have been on the journey to remove our fears and do the inner work that is required for us to have the great lives that we were meant to have in this realm and reality. And so welcome, Nathan. Welcome to my channel. I'm so glad to have you. How have you
Thank you so
been?
much for having me, Cheryl. I'm doing great. Thank you for doing this channel. Thank you for the work. This is just where the juice is, and it's such a privilege to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. And what I would like to talk about today is, the experiences of you and and we'll both talk about our experiences, but what you experienced when you came into, the understanding, that this is an inner journey, and that when we take this inner journey and we start working through our process of, what that kind of looked for you. How did you find MBT? How did you get here?
Wow, what's the short version? Because no one wants to hear the long version, including me. But the short the short version would be, um, oh, 32 now, so this goes back to a little bit when I was 20, and I left the faith that I had grown up in. I was trying to figure out, what really was going on and for myself, and so I was studying all kinds of things, world religions, philosophy, science, all kinds of world perspectives, and somehow, quite by accident, honestly, I was in Amazon. I typed in theory of everything because I was interested in, at the time I didn't have the language for it, but I was interested in, like, how quantum mechanics and general relativity, they came together, as if I would even understand the answer if it was given to me. Not a science whiz, but I found it compelling at the time. I found that really an interesting question. So I was expecting like a Stephen Hawking or Neil deGrasse Tyson or all these science educators and their books to pop up. And there's this there's this book with this giant toe, and it's got ones and zeros in it. And I'm like, that's an interesting looking book, but it had decent reviews. So I read the reviews. I'm like, oh, this guy combines science and spirituality and has a big picture of everything, including metaphysics. That's interesting. And so I hopped on his YouTube and just voraciously consumed the London lectures, Calgary, and just everything else around that. And so that was 2011. I was 21 at the time, and it took me a long time to get ready to actually do Tom's work as a practical experiential thing. So I circled around Tom's work intellectually for a really long time, just kind of getting myself primed and ready, like years, like 6 or 7 years before actually being ready to do any kind of meditation or personal work. But yeah, that was the journey. Some little nudge, because there was no reason for his book to pop up first, but there it was.
Theory of everything. Well, it was like the larger system went, he's looking for a toe. I know what toe I can give him.
Right? A
A
big toe
big toe,
in space.
a big fat toe in the middle of outer space. Here's your toe. So now you need to take the inward journey and get rid of your fear.
All right. All right. This
Oh
seems to
my
be kind
goodness.
of planned all along or something, for sure.
That's so funny. You probably had more of a science mind, but you also were intuitive and empathic too. So you probably had a little bit of both going on. And so the system was like, well, here, this will be perfect. It brings them both together. This is what he's really looking for. Because
Mhm.
you were looking for answers about your existence and reality and what is this place, right?
100%, 100%. The left and right brain, right? How Tom talks about that. And something I so appreciate about who you are as a person and the work that you do, Cheryl, here, because that right brain is so important for us, me kind of left brain intellectuals that also have a lot of right brain capacity, but we just don't know how to, like, it's like the glass on the top shelf. It's like, oh, like it's there. And sometimes if I get on my tippy toes, I can get it, but it's just not part of my everyday regular experience. So it's so nice to find that bridge in Tom's work, and and people like you. So for sure, that integration has been so helpful for me to have right and left brain kind of process combined.
Well, thank you, because that was one of the things that we kind of figured out, is that because I'm a very extreme right brain, that my channel is conversations from the right brain perspective, because that's the only perspective that I have. I don't have an intellectual perspective. I don't have very much. I do have logic, and yes, I can balance my checkbook a little bit, but it's not my favorite mode of being. My mode of being is in the intuitive world and in the inside world of relationship. And so that's my favorite mode. And so I've just lived in there so long that I really am not prone to do anything else. I mean, I was never going to be a computer engineer. I wouldn't have been able to. So and as far as being in the intuitive mind, there is no step-by-step process. The data just comes to me. But the problem is, when I talk to people who are in the left brain mode, I can't tell them how I arrived at that that subject that I just came to. I can't tell you, because I just get the data. I don't, it's not a step-by-step process getting to it. I just receive it, and then there it is. And it's just
Right.
something that, you get used to, especially if you're a young right brain. You just get used to it, and you don't realize that everybody else they're using their left brain too, and they have to go through this step-by-step process to arrive at a solution, or, something like that. But it doesn't work like that. So yes, this is perspectives from the right brain. And so just when we work together here, just if you need me to try to explain what I just said, just let me know, because I know I can go out into left field really fast and hang out there and not know I just left. So
Oh,
uh
I will feel free to do that. And honestly, it's probably why I feel really drawn to hanging out with right brain people, because I'm like, oh, that's actually my nature too. But I like, like left brain, that's acceptable to society or something. And because I was afraid of rejection or whatever, it's like, oh, I will be, up here in my head, and that will get me a relationship or something. And maybe that worked a little bit, but it's backfired mostly. So I'm really glad to. So so really glad to be spending time with, people that are just themselves and authentic, right brain. And if you fly off, I might just be on your coattails, be like, finally, I'm getting where I need to be.
where are we going? I don't know.
Right?
It'll
Right?
feel good, whatever it is. Yeah, it's so funny because when I was younger, I thought everybody hated me, and that was one of the things that Tom kept telling me. He said, Cheryl, you are a right brain. He said, this is a left brain world. You don't get it. Everybody else thinks different, and they have a different perspective. And I was like, huh? And because you think that you're okay, this person over here looks like me, that's another person, so they're a human being, they're going to have human being thoughts. No. It's a completely different perspective, and I was not accepted by the world. So it can kind of get you in self-esteem a little bit, and you got to get out of that. And because I found out I'm not here to fit in, I'm here to stand out.
Right?
Because that's
Right?
just the way I am. I'm not a left brain person. I can't go step by step process. So I'm glad that you appreciate the right brain thing. But you see, now you can do both. You can do the right brain thing, and you can also do the left thing, which makes you money in this world. Because as you know, right brains don't do so well there.
Slowly but surely, I'm getting there. I'm like, when they have training wheels for bikes, it's like there's more than just on or off. There's like, they kind of make the training wheels a little higher. So
Yeah.
if you get to, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of getting it, but sometimes I just need those little training wheels to keep me in line. So it's starting to be some capacity or capability, but still very much a work in progress. And that's what I'm excited to talk with you about today, because that's the whole point of the spiritual journey and working up fears. It's like, it's not about like being super person right away. It's about,
No.
really being in process, and that's right where we need to be. So,
Yes.
so that's why I'm really excited to talk with you today about that kind of thing because,
Yeah.
we are inspired by great spiritual teachers like Tom and others, and it's like, oh, I want to get there, I want to be like this person, and then come up far enough on the journey, it's like, oh, it's more about just being me, not about being them. But they're inspiring to us. And then
Yes.
to have peers and friends alongside that go, and here's like rubber meets the road on the ground, personal stories and experiences. Those can be so helpful. And I know we've shared a little bit in the past around that. So I'm excited to talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about that because, people today they're trying to discover this inner path and discover themselves and find the way to work with themselves and find where they have these fears at, because we all have them at some capacity, and it's these fears that are making our life into chaos. And we don't want we don't want a chaos anymore. We want to find our way out. So that's why I wanted to have this talk today, so that we can help others who are not at Tom's level. He's a highly evolved consciousness. He doesn't have fear. He doesn't have chaos. He doesn't have these problems that we encounter ourselves, because we're on the journey and we're on the path to get into where Tom could be. But it's not that that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to get to where we are so that we can move forward where our consciousness is at right currently. And so can you talk a little bit about that? How when you
Sure.
did start doing the work, and maybe you have a story that happened that showed you, where your stuff was, something you'd like to share.
Sure. Let's see here. I mean, it's taken me a long time to figure out how to do this fear work in MBT effectively because, there are two kind of extremes that I've experienced, and that's like avoidance. And, that wasn't hard. That was coming pretty naturally to me. So I got that skill down. And then the other polarity or extreme was um like, oh, I'm gonna go and just dig and work with it. And, and that was good because it wasn't avoidance. It was starting the path, getting the process started. And the old saying goes, you can eat a whole elephant if you just do one small bite at a time. But I was like, just give me the elephant, like where's my, show it to me. And so I'd go into these meditations and it'd be like way too much, way too intense, way over threshold. And so and that was actually what I was supposed to be doing at the time. So that wasn't the wrong thing to do. It's just thinking of an example. It's like, oh, when did it start really clicking in for me? Where it's like, okay, it's this is feeling good. It feels good. Beginning, middle, and end. Doesn't mean it's always easy or always pleasant, but like it generally is a feeling good kind of experience. It's positive. It's effective. It's taken me a while. It's taken me a while.
Did
So.
you have to get used to, I don't mean to interrupt, but did you have to get used to the feeling uncomfortable and being able to be uncomfortable without, distracting yourself and having to do something else, but just allowing the
Yeah.
uncomfortable feeling to be there? Did you have to get used to that feeling?
Oh, 100%. Because like you're saying, I would find all kinds of ways to be busy, Yeah,
I'm
exactly. Yep. Literally things
out of
like
here.
that. Yeah, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna play chess on my phone. I think I'm hungry. I wasn't hungry, but it's like
Yeah.
I think I'm hungry or like what's on YouTube? And it's just all of these kinds of ways, like you're saying, it was this avoidance strategy for
I'm gonna
sure.
go watch Tom Campbell.
Yeah, right. Oh, I'm doing the spiritual thing. I'm watching Tom, and here's, this personal piece of work knocking, ready for attention. It's like, oh, but I'm learning, you know.
Right,
And
right.
hey, there's a benefit to everything. So sometimes we need a little chess, we need a little food, a little Tom.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
everything works out in the end. But to your point, um, yeah, it took some time for me to be willing to say, what's here? Because it's already the way I found out for myself is like it's already happening. Just because I'm not looking at it, like I can still, it's almost like in the movies where you have two-story house and there's people jumping up and down on the top floor and the whole house is shaking and someone's you know taking the broom and saying stop it up there. And that's basically has been my experience when I wasn't just taking seriously, like I just need to look at what's going on in my house. I'd be like, I'm in my kitchen on the bottom floor and the whole house is shaking. I'm like, "Eh,
Yeah.
it's fine, there's nothing going on here. And so for sure, and, to just sit there and say, like, my house is really vibrating. There's a lot, there's a lot going on here. I don't know what to do
Yeah.
about it. I feel a little helpless, a little confused, and just to be willing to be what is, to be who I am and to be in what is. Yeah, that's a whole courageous step in of itself.
Yes, it is. Takes a lot of courage to face it and come to the fact that this is mine. This is my shaky house. It's a bit
Yeah,
vibrating, but this is where I'm at, and I'm going to move forward from here. And yeah, just coming to that sense that my house, my inner house, is not comfortable. And because, like you said, it's happening whether you're noticing it or not. Because you get and you go get in your car, you go out into the world, all of you is being reflected back at you, all of your fears and all of it. So then you have this experience that, you're standing there in a line and your worst fear walks up and stands next to you because it's reflective back to you, and whatever's resonating on the frequency that you're on, it's just coming right at you. So it's not like, it's not coming, because it's coming and it's there. But I think that's what it is. A lot of times, without understanding what's actually happening, we think that, well, this is just the way the world is. The world is just bad, full of bad people, but it's really our inner house that's doing this thing, and we're not cognizant of what it's doing in there,
oh,
in
for
here.
sure. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. So resonate with that. So, to be really um that tangible for a second, like this work really started getting quite, I was taking it seriously before, but it got really like, oh, like I need to dedicate my life to this. It got to that point. This was beginning of 2021. I just done an immersive with Tom. It was online. It was a very, very powerful experience. I still go through the journal experiences of that week, trying to integrate what happened. And I was living with my partner at the time. We were in Oregon. Wonderful, wonderful woman. And like all of us, we both were on a healing journey. And I just found that, you know, like you're saying, I wasn't just because I was in the house and I wasn't in that floor doesn't mean the whole house isn't shaking. Like, just the way I would interact in the home with her, like I would get the feedback, like
Yeah.
that, and it wasn't pleasant. And I was like, wow, I at the time I was in like graduate school that, frankly, I was like learning to study to be like a chaplain. And I was like, I cannot be a chaplain when literally my house is like this, condition. My environment where I live, like, is not pleasant. It's not loving. Like, I gotta just, and so I said, my full-time education is not being in school to be a chaplain. It's to like figure out how to be like a loving man and a decent person. And so
Oh.
I left graduate school, and well, I finished this semester because I was already halfway through. I just finished, and then I didn't keep going. And I dedicated myself to doing this work. And it makes me want to cry just thinking about it. But the system at that time had such a sincerity that I still try to tap into. And it's there, it comes, and I'm still very much doing the work. But I was so motivated. And talking about how like the world responds to us, like I was so motivated. The system was like, we're gonna meet this guy. And I'm not kidding. I would have a regular meditation time. And it was like, okay, like we have a lesson for you, like literally here's a blackboard, there's words. And I'm like, okay, like this is the lesson. And it was like that way for weeks, like when I just let this program go. And I said, my program is like my healing and taking my fears really seriously. And it was really the spring and summer of 2021 that was another life-changing milestone. I'd already been familiar with Tom and Tom's work, but I'm like, oh, like if I take this really seriously, like the system meets me and there's real
Yes.
significant traction. And it was helping. Like, it was slow moving the progress, but I was really able to show up in my relationship slightly differently. It was still in progress. It wasn't perfect, but I was starting to change a little bit and respond differently and show up and trying to like like a real practical example is like I would be in a simulation of our apartment where we were, and like she's cooking and like she says something like, "What's your response?" And then like the whole scene pauses, like, "What's your response?" And looking back at it now, intellectually, I'm like, I know what it is. But when you're in those states, it's the being level. It's just authentic. And I'm like, I don't know. And then I would I would say something, and I would literally hear like a wrong like horn, and through this series of interactions, it was like, oh, like the fear is my own inadequacy because she's upset about something, and I take it personally, and it's like,
Yes.
and then I would give this loving response, and it's like, like the scene, presses play from there, and like it's a much more pleasant interaction. It's like, wow, it really can be that simple, but at the being level, we're very different than who we think we are. And so it
Yes.
was like learning to walk, like infant level stuff, like at
Yes.
the being level.
Yes, we are very different at the being level than at the intellectual level. And it just hit me when you said the immersive online. That's where we spent a big chunk of time. That's where it was. And because when you said about your girlfriend, I had said something, oh, Nathan, you're such a kind person, and your vibe is really, is really nice to be around. And you said, don't ask my girlfriend.
That's like something I'd say in that state. I'm like, oh, sure, you have no idea.
You have no idea. And I thought, oh, he's in it. He's in it. And I knew where you were. I could feel where you were because I'm just now coming out of the meat of it, where you're meeting yourself full on, full of fear. And then you realize how much you've hurt a lot of people around you because you were full of fear. Then you feel guilty and you're like, oh God, I'm such a schmuck, and so then you got to work through the guilt of feeling bad about being the way you are. And then you just have to keep working at it. And then finally you're like, okay, I am where I am. And I can't grow unless I am where I'm at. So I have to accept the way I am. It's just the way it is. And that's going to be my drive to improve this because look what I just did. And so that was the drive. So anyway, that's when we talked for a bit at that immersive. I was
Oh,
there.
it's really fun to come full circle, and thank you for
Yeah.
making that connection. I'd totally forgotten that. Yep,
You're like,
and
oh,
no
you
wonder I
have to talk
totally
to my
forgotten that. I'm
girlfriend.
like,
You don't even
oh,
know. Oh no. And I was like, oh, because those close relationships with a partnered situation, that's where the rubber meets the road. And your being level is we should talk a little bit about the being level. So the
yeah,
being level is how you feel about it's how much fear you have inside of you, how much love you have inside of you. It is the summation of all your experiences, right? And then your intellect is who you think you are, how you think that people perceive you. It's almost just like it's just a perception. It's not reality really. And so that's why, somebody will stand up and say, well, I don't have any fear. And then 10 minutes later, they're in an argument with somebody because they've been triggered because they have a fear under there that they're not adequate or something. Right. And so, but they
100%.
don't have any fear. Nope, don't got none of that. I'm not afraid.
Yes. Exactly, exactly. I mean, it was so helpful for me, and it's such a simple distinction in Tom's model, but it was like a light bulb for me. It's like, oh, the intellect and the being level, and as someone who has lived most of their life out of their intellect, I've been really, really fine-tuned and honed in the skill of like using my intellect to tell myself that I'm okay, tell myself that everyone else has the problem, and tell myself that, oh, like when that thing pops up in me, that's not really mine, that's theirs, and all this projective stuff. And so, it was so helpful for Tom to be like, well, if you want to know who you really are, look at your emotions, look at your dreams, look at not who you think you are, but who you really are if you were being honest and authentic. And I was like, wow, I don't know myself. And I really felt that. And still to some degree feel that I'm getting to know this person a little bit more than I am. But
Yeah.
it's like it is a whole, cave for spelunking, that's like underneath the surface, but there are caverns and all kinds of
Yeah.
beautiful crystallides over here, and I don't know what that is over there. And it's like, there's all kinds of things in there that are wonderful and mysterious
Yes.
both. And it has been so helpful because it's hard work. This is one way I've been able to let go of the intellect, and this is just a tool I found useful. Maybe others will too. But when I started to realize how much work it is for the intellect to do its job of controlling perception of myself, perception of others, controlling other people's perception of me, it's exhausting. It's like it was my modus operandi. I didn't have anything to compare it to, but when I started to feel a little bit of like just what being authentic and myself was a little bit, then I could contrast it a little bit. I'm like, oh, that's so much more work, just to like intellectually control and do all this stuff. And so it's a thing, to learn to really just trust that who we are is okay. We can improve it. We can and make our lives more enjoyable, and it's like it's just okay. Whatever is in the caverns, or whoever we are, it's like it really
And
is
if it's
okay.
shaking, if the house is shaking, that's okay too.
It's okay, like,
Let it shake. Let it
j-
shake the walls off.
try to find a beat to it, tap your foot a little bit, do a dance, like, just make something positive of it and work with it,
Right. Work with yourself. You've got a flat tire in the back and you're trying to get your wagon down the road and it's a little funky. Just get you a funky little dance with it. And
That's a great image.
and not beat yourself up because you've got a funky wagon wheel. But that it's been like that for a long time, and you just didn't understand really how to fix it. So you just had to go with it. And so what you do is you just keep going with it until you're going to have these interactions that are going to finally start getting you to a place where you need to be, to where you can feel the uncomfortableness and you can feel your walls shaking, and then it starts becoming okay. Then you start being a little bit more authentic, and then that's kind of okay, but because it's okay where you're at. Then you start letting go of a little bit of that guilt and self blame. Then you start letting go a little of that and letting that be. And then as you start easing back and really start sitting and being your true authentic self, people start reacting to you in a different way. Because when you're not being authentic, people can feel that incongruency. They can feel that you're not who you wait a minute, because people are really reacting to our vibration, right? They're not really
100%.
reacting to what we do. They're
Or even
reacting
say, yeah.
to our vibration. And so when we really start being authentic, yeah, it's going to be off-putting for some because that's just who we are. But then we have the option at that point to say, you know what, I have this fear and this is what I do, and I apologize. Is there anything I can do to help? See, you can flip the script because now you've accepted where you are and now you're ready to move out of there,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah,
help is on
right.
the way.
Right. And that's just what's so mind-blowing to me still. And it's like it even moves me emotionally. It's like we are how to say, we are so much in process. And I really connect with what Tom says around, we got a lot of fear. I got a lot of fear, a lot of ego, a lot of stuff. And when we start just saying like, oh, like it's okay, like this is me, this is where I start. How can I work with this positively? What can I make the most of this? All of a sudden we are, like you said, like we flip the script. Like, not only do we have a long ways to go, but our potential for creating ourselves and our lives in positive ways is limitless. I've really experienced that. It is limitless. And it's like that's like two ends of the universe, like, so far seemingly apart, these concepts of like we got a long ways to go. And wow, we are like beautiful creators that can really change in deep fundamental ways and be a
Yes.
blessing to ourselves and others. And
Hmm.
like, wow, they are both true.
They are, yes, they're both true. And that we are infinitely way more powerful than what we think. Because once you start working with yourself and you find out that the self is the connection with, our creator, for me, that's what it seems like, you know, it's just, wow, I'm working with something a lot bigger than me, but I'm also, as powerful, and I'm a creator here too. And I think that's what we're doing. We're like baby creators, and we're kind of like in a containment field, so we're not like Godzilla's like stepping on all the people in the city, on accident, because we're creators, right? We're a powerful creative force. And so you don't want to just let that force loose if it's a new consciousness and we're trying to figure it out. Well, you would put it in a containment field, right? Earth school. So you can
right,
come here, you can do your Godzilla thing, and you're not really going to hurt anything because it's just a bunch of ones and zeros.
right,
You know?
right, right. Yep, this is just a really fine-tuned place for us to figure things out. And
So
we're
that we
real.
don't, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And wow, the ouchies and the boo-boos and those things, they feel really real. They are really real. I'm someone that's experienced ouchies and boo-boos from others, and at early ages as an adult. So don't want to like, negate anyone's
Yeah,
trauma or
not minimizing
challenging
people.
story.
People
And
that
your
do
point,
have pain here. Yes, they
for
do.
sure, for sure. And I really resonate with what you're saying, Cheryl, around like here we can sort all that out because it really is like in the larger context, you have people with near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and all kinds of experiences where they connect with, how this Earth school is contained in something much larger, and you connect to that much largeness. It's like, oh, it's all okay. Like it
Yeah.
really is. It really is so deeply and fundamentally okay.
Like,
And that's like,
oh,
okay,
oh, we don't die. Oh, wait a minute. We don't die anyway. That's not true.
right,
So
right. And it
then,
totally shifts the context of our suffering, of other people's suffering, and we get to say, how can I help? Like, I love how Tom says it so simply. I was listening to his softer side of MBT, the other night, and his video on YouTube. And it's like, the question becomes not what's happened to me or how can I get mine, but how can I help? Like, who's out there that could use some love, some support, some connection,
mhm,
and
some
that question
connection.
feels really authentic when we connect with those larger spaces.
Yes, yes, it does. Yeah, and when we have these traumatic things happen to us in our lives and stuff, it's almost like as we get rid of our fear, then we have an easier time connecting with people that had those kind of traumas. And I think that that's part of it through the healing process of healing those trauma is, if more people and everybody included, once we get, remove some of that fear, what we do is we're coming them and asking them what they need and how can we help? Because really, in the bigger picture of the whole thing, because we're all connected together. When we get rid of our fear, it's going to help the next person down the line that is still in their fear and they're having trouble moving out of that trauma because of the fear that they had, or and a lot of trauma, not all of it, but some of it is just from misunderstanding what's happening at the time,
Yeah,
because I think that, when the really bad stuff goes down here, there's very few people that can tell you they remember it. I think that it's true that, like Tom said, our consciousness gets pulled out. It doesn't want our consciousness damaged here. So when the thing starts to get really dicey here, if something happens to, there's a car going to run into you or whatever, I think the system pulls our consciousness out before we experience any of that stuff. And all I have is my experience of things like that. And I had a near death experience. I can't remember any of it. And it was horrible from what I hear. It was bad, but I don't remember a thing of it. And so if I had trauma from it, it was just me bringing the thoughts of that forward with me in time. You see what I mean?
I
And that,
do. You didn't
and
experience the full on, the intensity, directness of the experience. So, yeah, I forget what author talks about this, but they were actually studying this from like a physiological perspective because the nervous system has like almost like a little switch where it's like, oh, this is going to be too much. It just turns on
yeah,
this little switch. And they weren't a religious person, but it was just written in the 1800s or something. So they had religious language, and they were like, there's a mercy of God built into nature. They were looking at how this
yes,
happens with not only humans but other animals. This happens, with the fainting opossum, right? It's like,
yes,
there's this way in which when the end seems inevitable, it's like they're not there anymore. It's like
yeah.
there's something of a mercy built into reality, and so it's a thing for sure. And this reminds me of if you don't mind me sharing, Cheryl, a personal
Oh, that's why
example
we're
of
here to share.
because
Share
yeah,
away.
yeah. I'll open up a little bit because I've benefited so much from people's vulnerability and including yours. We're talking about your sharing on the fireside chats, this whole chronicle of working with fear. So if people want to see a good example, I just encourage them to watch you and the fireside chats, maybe in the description or something, there can be
Yeah,
like what
I'll put it in there. I'll put a link to
right?
where you can see me dripping fear out of every orifice that I had.
Oh,
Trying to figure out how to get rid of it.
oh. And what you didn't know was literally I was on those live fireside chats and I was like, Cheryl's really doing it. I feel so inspired. I have such deep respect. But of course, when we're in those seats, we're like, oh, what am I doing? Why am I sharing like this? And so I've actually done that too. There was a fireside chat where I was talking with Tom, and I wasn't even saying like, "Oh, this was happening to my friend," or "What do you think generally?" I was just straight up like, "Tom, in my meditation, I am a mean, aggressive dude that I'm attacking myself," and I'm like, Tom's like, "Well, I have some thoughts as he does," and it was super helpful. But where I was going with that is I'll share a meditation example of working with a fear as it relates to early trauma because maybe it'll help people.
There you go.
Because this again this came a little bit later in my meditation practice because in the beginning I would just bite off way more than I could chew. It felt intense, it was intense. I'd come out of it like kind of beat up and again that's right where I needed to be at the time. And I think my journey and yours and many others say like, like it often starts that way and maybe even appropriately so because we're just getting started, but it can and should and will become gentler, easier, more positive. There might be some challenging moments, but overall, it's an overall
Yes.
positive thing. And
It
so
like
this
goes
came,
intense and then it backs off. Then it'll go
yes,
intense and then it'll back off. And that's why you just
exactly.
got to keep just working with it. It's like trying to massage a frozen piece of, you know, corn or something. You just got to keep working with it and keep it.
Right?
And then you pass through and get to the other side of it. And it doesn't take your whole lifespan to get through the worst part of it. It just takes maybe a year or two. But through each passage of each little thing, it's like a lock gate, you get to feel a little bit better. You don't have to
For
feel as
sure.
icky and your house isn't shaking and rattling as bad as it was in the beginning. So as you're feeling
Yeah,
better, your house stops shaking as much and you can just get into a little vibe of dancing, and then it's easier. Then life gets
right.
easier. Then you have more energy to put into it to go ahead and get rid of it, get yourself
100%.
down the road. So what's your story about your meditation?
100%. So this is something, and I think a lot of people resonate with this, but in particular, if there's any like younger men that might understand this,
Yeah.
like there are many. I think it's like 1 in 4 like men. 1 in 4 men have had like early sexual experiences as a child that were very confusing or overwhelming. And 1 in 3 women, even more so women, and that's just what we know statistically. It's probably even more,
I think it happens to a lot
underreported
of
and all
us.
that.
It's the nature
100%.
of the thing. We're humans and we got a lot of instincts around sexuality and it can get wonky quick.
Wonky quick. And so, for sexuality stuff, I think your interviews with Tom around Probably a Pregnant Woman are just such a fantastic resource. So people should check that out if they haven't yet.
Yeah.
Um, but I bring this up because I just don't ever hear people talking about it very much. And the very few times later in life when I did, I was like, oh, I could have heard this years ago. So I'm just offering myself very freely um, as a way of just encouraging people that there's nothing wrong or bad with people that have, for instance, what I have experienced throughout my life would be like, I don't know, kind of living my life, and there would be like for lack of better words, like sexual intrusion of like, images or thoughts or something like, where on earth did that come from? Right. And it's like,
Right?
geez Louise. And then of course I would personally interpret it as something wrong with me, which is
Oh,
not
yeah.
right, of course. But
No.
so, fast forward, I would try to understand this in meditation, but I wouldn't even know how to interpret what I was getting. It was overwhelming. It's like, what is this? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, no, it was all metaphorical and
Mm-hmm.
weird, frankly, and I just couldn't work with it. But as I've grown and as I've worked on things that are less intense, things that were feeling like the right size of challenge,
Mm-hmm.
then just how to say, I even went. It was fun getting ready for this interview. We had talked on the phone earlier about like, oh, meditation experiences around working with fear, and I was like, actually, it would be a great excuse to go through my meditation journal and keep a journal of all my journeys, and just see like where some that would be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I found one
Oh,
that
good.
later in the journey was so helpful around. this experience for me. And so I won't read it verbatim, but basically, I I start as I do with my meditation, and I'm just like settling, right? Just like having uh, my mind, my body, my nervous system, all those metaphors, whatever you want to say, everything was just quiet, but I wasn't like checked out. I was very present. I was just very calm, feeling good. I was like, oh, this would be a good time to work on, stuff around sexuality, like what's going on there. And
What's happening there?
right, because I
Yeah,
just knew that was an area of healing that I just needed to be working on.
right.
And there's this little kid version of me who is very who is very confused and is crying. And I won't go into physical details, but it was clear that this kid had been through something. And so I was like, oh wow. So seeing obviously this version of me or this aspect of me. And I also, just because I was relaxed, it wasn't feeling threatening. I could also sense there were other parts of me that had like anger towards that part or disgust. And I was just embracing all of that experience. It's all good. And it felt very easy to say, no matter what happens here, it's going to be healing. It's going to be a positive outcome. And I really felt that as I felt that because I know I was stepping into some stuff.
Yeah.
And so it didn't feel like that was going to be too much. I was going to step into some stuff, but I had a lot of confidence. I had a lot of feeling that it was going to be a good experience. And so I was able to like comfort this child, and then we started playing. We started playing with toys, and I don't remember the toys, doesn't matter. But then like the child put a toy onto my crotch, and that was clearly like a way that the child was like trying to understand something that had happened. And so I just put the toy aside, and I held the child, and I said, "Oh, I want you to know that you're a good person and that you're lovable, and anything that's ever been overwhelming or confusing has not been your fault. And no one should ever touch you in that area except a mommy or a doctor. And if that's ever happened, it's not your fault." And then this child started telling me about my past and like a family member and like stuff that had happened. And I was just listening and being with the child. And it was a very positive overall experience. Um, and basically, when the child was all done sharing it, was like, I'm tired now. I want to go to sleep, which was a very positive sign because it's like, oh, like I've had stuff around sleep and not being able to like feel safe and sleeping and stuff. And the child was like, I'm ready to go to sleep. And I'm like, okay, you can sleep here and you'll be safe. And the child really felt that and went to sleep. And it was this really lovely like experience where there were some intense moments in it visually or informationally, but it
Hmm.
was all sort of within capacity, or like I felt confident about it, or
Hmm.
I just knew in the back of my mind like support would somehow show up from the system or whatever if I really needed it. But
Yeah.
it was this powerful experience of like coming to terms with an aspect of myself that was probably trying to get my attention before with like really intrusive, intense stuff that I would misinterpret as a problem with me, or
The house
I
is
try
shaking.
the
The
house is
house is
shaking,
shaking.
right, or I try to like go deep right away, do that work in the beginning of my journey, and it would just be way confusing over threshold, didn't know what I was getting, couldn't interpret it
Yeah.
right. And so I was like, I'd forgotten about that experience. That was a really, I remember it just from start to end. I was like, that was a very helpful meditation experience. And I only got to that point because I had sort of fumbled and fumbled through, and I'm not exaggerating, like dozens and dozens and dozens of meditation experiences where it was not like that at all. And so it's like, okay, like you're saying, it gets easier. We find our way
Mm,
and
yeah.
navigating these kinds of things.
And thank you for sharing your story. I mean, I find your story amazing and courageous. And when we deal with that kind of situations in our lives, what I think happens is that like a barrier gets put up, and so that we can feel all that stuff and how it affected us as a person. We can feel all that stuff, but we don't have strong ties back to the memories of it. So it's like we can feel all of it, but we can't remember what happened, because when you're children, we don't remember every single incident, especially not the scary ones. So our mind kind of puts those over to the side so that we can kind of function in the world with this trauma that we had. And I think that that's it. You know, the abuse happened, but that's not what caused the problem. The problem is not being able to work through and resolve what happened and why you felt the way you did. So once you figured it out, it's like, oh, that wasn't even my fault. I was feeling guilty about myself. Oh, that's why my house was shaking, because I was beating myself up, you know. So I think when we separate those two, the trauma is what how that affects you and what you leave that experience with, right? And then the abuse is the actual event that happened, which I think is two different things. And so I think that once we can break down those barriers, and then we can get back into those areas of our mind where we did have some abuse that happened to us, and that, you know, that pulled some trauma through that with us, then you can really let that trauma go. You can let the trauma go because you're healing the abuse part of it, because really the trauma is what we do to ourselves about it. It's like, oh, I didn't do the right thing, and that's why that happened to me. When the fact is, 100% of the things that happened to you as a child were not your fault. It was the adults, the caregivers that was with us. It was their fault that those things that happened to us, because we were in their care, and we didn't understand the world, you know, the way we needed to protect ourselves from things like that. And so I think that that's the difference in the actual event and then the trauma. And then the trauma happens because of it becomes inward focused, and we start beating ourselves up, and we already are traumatized from it to begin with, right? So then we're you know, because that's the only way we can put it, because children are inward focused, right?
They
And
are, and they're egocentric, which is a neutral term, not anything negative. Like they
right,
inherently just developmentally the world revolves around them, and it's supposed to be that way for a period of time. And so anything
yeah,
that happens relates back to them. So something super or scary, overwhelming, confusing happens. It's has to
yes,
be somehow related to them rather than,
yes.
you know, this thing. And so for
There was
sure, the
something
way
wrong
we
with me. It
interpret,
was this is my fault that this happened to me. And that's just what we do. And I think that's what creates a lot of the trauma. I'm not saying all of it. Yes, people get abused in this place, and it happens. It does happen. It happens to a lot of people. But I think that it can be healed and recovered so much
100%.
easier, you know. And I think all of it can be healed and recovered. We don't have to drag around this trauma ball with us, you know, because we're beating ourselves up over something that wasn't even our fault to begin with.
Right, right. And how liberating it is to say like, oh, like if it was just purely events and not interpretation, then we're kind of screwed. Like, oh, like, you know, stuff happens and then, you know, there's your sentence for the rest of your life. But it isn't. It really is like we don't place any blame on ourselves or any children for making an interpretation like that. And we just say, ah, like, but, you know, we can do something about interpretations. Like we can go back, we can, in a metaphorical way, hold the child, have a conversation, you know, like
Yes.
all the powerful things
Oh,
that
you're
you know,
okay, baby. It's okay.
yeah, we reintegrate back with
Yep.
aspects of ourselves that have been, you know, like you said, you know, taken apart, rightly so, so that we can like function in the world. But then it's like, okay, time to call the cattle home. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, you know, they're bringing them on back to the barn, and you know, we'll have the whole herd here.
Yeah.
And so, it that's the beautiful, exciting part about what I've always been inspired by, like Tom's work when he's sharing, and people like you sharing. It's like, oh, like this isn't just conceptual. Like we can really experience real change that's palpably felt. We're
Hmm.
operating differently in the world, and we can do that through support from others and also from our own practices, our meditation. And
And
it's like,
going in
wow,
and allowing
yeah,
ourselves to feel the way we do, and try to reconnect with those younger parts within us. And you know, this ties into something I just did a podcast the other day. We were talking about this, the distinctions between abuse that happens and trauma, and what is that distinction, you know, because once you can make that distinction, you can start really getting headway on some things. And one of the things I thought of was this. Excuse me. One of the things I thought of was, okay, look at PTSD in veterans. Well, if it's because of the thing that they see that traumatize, the event, if it's because of the event, then everybody should have PTSD. All of them. Why? They don't all have it. There's only a subset of people that have PTSD when they come back. They all don't get it. And that's what triggered my mind is why? How come they all didn't get it? How come they all didn't? It's because how you view what happened over there. Did you view it as like, well, sometimes this is what happens in this world and shit happens, Or was you looking at it like, oh my God, how could I have done that? I should have never done that. I should have never done anything like that. You see the difference there? One
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
accepting the things the way things are in the world. The other one is turning that and putting the focus in the problem internally that you caused a problem there when you didn't do anything. You were in the middle of a war. Those are ugly. They're not handing flowers out to everybody. And so I think that's what I really wanted to do is pull those two things apart. Because once you really, burrow down into what causes some people to have terrible trauma from an experience in life where they're just dysfunctional and they can't even function in life, to where here's this person over here, they're walking around like nothing ever happened. Like that guy, what's his name? Viktor Frankl. I
Viktor
can't ever.
Frankl. Yeah.
Yeah, he was in
Yeah.
a Nazi concentration camp, but he was a psychiatrist when he went in. The Nazis killed his whole family, all of them. He's the only one left. He's in this concentration camp, and he's in there trying to figure out how he can help everybody in there, how that he can help the other people survive it. And he came up with a book and called it Man's Search for Meaning. When he got out of there, he should have been just so traumatized that he couldn't function. This man got out of there and helped save half of the planet from themselves and working with people because he was a psychiatrist when he went in. And he never felt that way. He just accepted life on life's terms. This is the way it happened. My whole family got wiped out. He didn't wipe them out. He's not in control of what other people are doing, especially a whole army, right? So he didn't come out from that experience as a just terribly traumatized person. He came out of it with an understanding of a deeper meaning in human life, and he ended up helping a whole bunch of people because of that. And I think that empaths, they tend to be more sensitive, but really it comes down to how we see ourselves in that dynamic of what happened. If we see ourselves that we did something wrong, then we take that trauma, we pick it up. I'm not saying we're doing something wrong, but this is just how some people deal with trauma, and that there's another way to do it, to let go of that and feel better about yourself because you didn't cause the whole thing. I'm sorry, you're a little child. You're not causing the whole world and what it's doing. You're just kind of there dealing with what's happening. And so just by switching our perception about some of the things that cause us to suffer here, we can get ourselves out of there, out of that negativity, and heal ourselves. And that is a beautiful
Yes.
thing to me.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And like you're saying, great example like Viktor Frankl show us that it's possible. Like Viktor Frankl, I mean, his whole logotherapy type of approach that he
Mm-hmm.
created, it's all about like interpretation of things. Like how do you interpret? What is the meaning that you make out of events? And that determines our experience, which I think is a really helpful insight among others. And and so it is so inspiring because it's like we can experience change like that and healing
Mm-hmm.
and so I just so appreciate how that was catalyzed for you. It's just um what is it, Yogi Bear, that says you can learn a lot just by observing. And it's like some veterans have it, some don't. What's the difference? And that
Mm-hmm.
whole question leads to this insight around wow, we can make different interpretations out of life. Now, I
Yes.
think this is really interesting, Cheryl, if you can humor me, because when we say, make a different interpretation, that's we're talking about the being level. Because when we interpret in the past, when negative things have happened and we interpret them about us, that seemingly happens automatically. That just happens. Well, that's the being level. And when
Yes.
we talk about um, like how we can now interpret things. Um, we're talking at that same level. Like it seems automatic. So it's like the question becomes, and I'd love to hear your reflections on this, like how do we make authentic different interpretations at the being level? Because I know for me as an intellectual person, what I would do is I would hear someone say, "Oh, make a different interpretation on life," and I'll go, "Okay, I can do that," and I would get really excited, and then I'd go out, and then at the being level, something would happen in the world, and I would have my interpretation already sort of made, but then intellectually I'd say, "No, it's this," and I'd try to like, shoehorn something in, and that shoe ain't fitting yet, So it's like,
Yeah.
how do we at the being level, do you think, make like more authentic interpretations that are serving us, like how do we operate from that place and how do we do that? It's hard to even say it without getting
Yeah.
intellectual, but
I kind of think what you're pointing to is how do we change our perception of what's happening? How do we, because there's that thing, we don't see things the way they are. Rather, we perceive things the way we are. So,
great quote. Yeah.
yeah. But when we can get in there and get a hold of that aperture for our perception and how we're looking at something, and this is what I found in my process was how you can get in there and change those perceptions is I just got a diary. Every single time I had a negative feeling, I start, I would look at the room around me. What's happening? What caused this? Okay, I'm feeling negative. I can feel this. Now I'm thinking it's somebody else, but see, I trained myself away from the outside world to kind of withdraw from it and go and write down my thoughts somewhere else. Then I could, if I was in a big group of people, whatever, I couldn't deal with it right then. Then I would go back. What was that? What was happening right then? And as I got in there and got rid of some of those fears, I got to the one around fear of feeling inadequate. Because see, once you can get that fear kind of better, then you can shift your perception easily because it's no longer about you. Because when someone's ugly and they're not acting right, that's not your problem. That's about them. So see, once you get this one a little bit, then it becomes a lot easier to shift your perception. And I also think it's because you're backing out of that fear, you're slowly getting out of it, you're healing it, then more love is coming into your being. And when you're looking through the eyes of love, you automatically have a bigger picture to where you have bigger perceptions.
Mm,
So I think it's just you keep working with the process. And it's almost as you're doing this fear work, it's like you're taking a giant rag and you're cleaning your perception lens. You're
mm,
cleaning it, and you keep going, you're going to get a pretty clear perception of what's happening to where when you feel a negative emotion, it's not a knee-jerk reaction. Why did you say that to me? Then you feel the negative emotion, you go, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Is there anything I can do? You need a hug? Or it's like, oh, they're having a bad day. Look at them. They've got dark uglies and they're just kind of coming out and doing all this. Woo, that's dark uglies. Okay, that's theirs. So I'm gonna excuse myself from the situation and I'm gonna go get a glass of tea and let them have their space. But then I'm gonna circle back. Because see, I've got a little bit better self-esteem. I don't feel like I'm inadequate. I know that the problem is within them and that they're feeling bad. So I can circle back and come back because I'm okay. Even if I did make a mistake, I can own it, because I have enough self-esteem now that my perception is correct. I'm not the one that got upset. It was the other person there that is their house is shaking, right? Not mine. Mine still shakes sometimes, but it's not shaking right now. They're the one that's upset, not me. So then I circle back. I say, I understand that something I said or whatever, made you upset. And I apologize. This was my intention. And a lot of times it was just their perception. They perceived it in some kind of way where they didn't feel good thoughts about themselves. And they think that you're trying to do something to them, which you're not. You're just being you're not trying to hurt nobody. Most people that were around every day, that's not their goal. I'm going to walk up to this person, get in a conversation, and hurt their feelings. That's not their intent. And for people that really have negative intent and want to hurt people, you know who those people are.
yeah, they're qualitatively different for sure.
Yeah, because they're
Yeah.
different. They feel different. So yeah, I think that it's a matter of drilling in there and working with your fear, and it's about not letting the abuse that happened to you cause you to carry that trauma around and self-focus it in on yourself and put this blame on yourself for what happened. You get that out of there, then you start feeling a little better about yourself. Then once you get to there, then you really have real power here, because now you're operating with less fear and more love, and now you can focus on others, and your perception is shifted out of fear and into love.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's just super inspiring, and I really mean that because when I hear people like, "Oh, like I just made a choice. Like when this started happening, I was gonna do this over here," and it's like that kind of energy where it's like it's almost like the buck stops here. Like when this happens, I'm going to do this. There's something around that energy that if we could bottle that and sell that, it would be out of stock always. Like there's something about that kind of energy of like this will be different. Like I'm
Yes.
going to, and then I love how you said it too. Once there's a threshold of like um, self-esteem or being in relationship with oneself that's a little more positive, it's like then
Yeah.
it just takes off. And
Yeah.
Tom says this, it's like like it gets easier to grow the more you grow, and
Yes.
so get a little success, a little confidence, and that helps with the next right size challenge building. And I've been thinking about this a lot, Cheryl. This has been an important meditation for me. Like what's the right amount of challenge? Because I just recently started oh, I got your puppies back there. I love it.
Toby Two Comes, what are y'all doing? Well, come here.
Oh, look at those wagging tails. Oh, they're adorable.
This is Jax. Say hello, Jax. He's the cutest. He has the craziest hairdo. Look at this. It's just
Oh
ridiculous.
yeah. Oh yeah. He
He's
can
very
rock the messy
sweet.
hairdo so good. Yeah.
He's very
Movie
sweet.
star.
Okay.
Oh,
So
they're
where
so
were we?
sweet. Oh, I was just appreciating your like sort of sequencing of things there because certain things become possible when we are our own allies. Like there's probably some
Yeah,
challenges
yes.
that until we have a little more self-affirmation, self-validation, whatever, probably going to be working on other areas first, like that area. And so
Yeah.
and it's probably because I've been going to the gym more regularly, which I've been really enjoying. And I'm like, oh, like there's such a metaphor that seems cliche, but it's so true. It's like I remember when I first started going, I'm like, I'm a smaller person, like 5'6". I used to be 130 pounds. I've gained a little since, but 130 was my baseline for years and years. And so I'm this skinny little guy that's
Yeah.
short, and I go up to the gym and I'm like, no shame, where's the 5 pounders? It's like going over here, and you got, you know, Mr. The Rock combined with Vin Diesel over here, and they're like, and I'm like, okay, well, here's my 5 pounders, and wow, like it was feeling good. Like I knew it was the right amount of challenge because when I would let my ego get the best of me, and it only happened once, I learned, and I pick up ones that are way too heavy, I'm like, I'm seriously gonna hurt myself if I keep doing this. Like I'm putting this down. Where's the 5 pounders? And it's like, oh, like I know this is right because like I feel the tension, I feel the pull, like it is
Hmm.
challenging me, but it feels okay. Like it feels
Yeah.
good. And I'm like, oh, this is such a metaphor for what I've been experiencing in my meditations, where I'm like, what's the right amount of challenge? What feels I can feel the tension, I can feel the pull, but it feels okay. And I think that's so important for my journey because I have noticed in myself there's like this one of my teachers called it well. It's like there's this addiction to intensity and this addiction to like find what's what's the thing? It's like "Grr." And it's like wow, that was a place to start. I don't judge it in me or others, but it just wasn't very effective, wasn't very pleasant, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's something around like right size challenge, and I don't know, like I'm still kind of sussing that out. I still both at the gym physically and in my meditation, sometimes I just do. it's a bit wonky in there, and I just let that be okay, stay positive about it. So I'm still sussing that out, but I'm just sort of saying out loud something that's been on my mind recently around like how right size challenge, how to really find that somehow. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about
It's
that,
just
but
feeling the tension of it, not to where it's overwhelming us and knocking us off our feet. And when you're doing this fear work, you don't want it to knock you off your feet, because it's a process that takes about a year and a half. That's the worst part of it. I don't know for you. For me, a year and a half was the worst part of it. And I kept going to fireside chat, Tom, what, because my house, it was just really rocking and rolling in there. And
yeah.
so just give yourself a year to heal. I mean, that's
Mm,
not that much time in the scheme of things. You've got the rest of your life that can be great, because you've got offloaded this ball and chain that you've been dragging around your whole life, making yourself miserable with it, and it gives you a chance to just let all that go. But it just, each time I would go into that fear and I could feel the shake really rattling, the house really rattling, I would just sit there for as long as I could take it. I didn't overdo to where I just couldn't do anything for a week and I was just crying all the time and all of that. I did enough to, okay, this is uncomfortable. This doesn't feel good. It's like, oof, I don't like Cheryl that much, but it's going to be okay, and it's going to
mm,
be all right. And I'm going to write down every single time I have a negative feeling. I'm going to write down what's going on around me. And so I made that a practice. And then I made that bracelet, of course, that you know about. And I
mm.
was able to, because one of the big things I could do is a right brain. See, I could just dissociate, just take off and be gone. Ta-da! So I wasn't dealing with none of it, none of my problems, none of it, because I'm very imaginative and I could go to places in the large system and I could just go hang out. Hi, I'm not there. Yeah. Woo. That avatar sure's had a hard time right now, but I'm not. And so I learned to stay focused here when it was happening. And one of the biggest fears that I worked through, it was my first real big fear challenge, was I had a terrible fear of big dogs. Well, I mean, you saw the big dog that was laying over there in my room just a minute ago. So I went through a whole process. He was one of the big dogs that followed me home, because I had big dogs coming out of everywhere, chasing me around, scaring me. And so here's Carl, the sweetest dog on the planet. And I turn around and I thought to myself, that's the biggest dog on the planet, and it's right behind me. Oh my God. I grabbed my little dog and I'm just, and I ran all the way home. And I got in the house. I said, kid, the polar bear followed me home. This dog, his head was massive. It was huge. And I said, this, hey, and he's out in the front and he followed me. And my partner walks outside and he looks at him and his whole face just melted. And he goes, oh, what a beautiful dog. Here I am. So Carl came. We have assistants coming from everywhere. Carl came to help me get over my fear of big dogs, because he was the gentlest giant, the sweetest big dog. And it was so funny, the first couple of weeks he was in the house, he would come around the corner, I wouldn't see him, and I would just, I'm scared of my own dog, I'm like, and so Carl was so gracious to scare me and let that come forward. And I dealt with it. I'd keep my bracelet on. Stop, Cheryl. You're not in danger. It's just Carl. And look at Carl. Oh, hi, mom. He was just the sweetest thing.
I know. Talk about like just looking at like literally just what are the facts in front of me? It's this
Yeah.
cute big dog, And I love that tool because it's like it's almost like, it was a bracelet, but it could be anything, It's like
It could be
I
anything.
just go to this thing and it pauses the interpretation that's happening and says,
Oh, there you go.
what are the facts? I'm like, that's a brilliant tool. Like you're not in danger to like really flood your system probably multiple times a day. Like you're not in danger and really feeling that and changing the interpretation. It's like
Say
that's
that
some
again, what you
epic
just
work.
said. So what the bracelet is doing is it's giving you a moment there so that you can change the interpretation of what's happening, right?
Yeah, that like, that
So
activation or that,
it was helping
energy
me
coming up around.
it was helping me shift my perception while it was happening. So that, and while it's happening and you're feeling that fear, you're at the being level, right? You're in it to win it.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, the game has started. Yep, for sure.
The game has started. Press go. Here we are. That's so funny.
Yep.
Oh, it's been such a great talk. This is going to be really helpful, I think, because that's where on one of the podcasts I was talking, and it was like, well, you just don't understand that I've had all this abuse and trauma and suffering. It's like, I know, yes, I do understand. I've been through it. I had abuse in my life too. I think we've all had it in some form, some fashion, some way. And I do understand. I get it. What I'm trying to tell you is that our perception of it is what's doing the damage, not the event itself. Because if you look at it, most of these events were like, no big deal, really. It didn't kill you. You're still here. It may not have felt good, but hey, it just is what it is. It's part of life. Things happen here. And
For sure, for sure.
the trauma is the perception, the wrong perception that you've got of that event, to where you're looking at it like, you've caused that to happen to yourself. And when we have negative emotions that are aimed toward ourselves, we were just talking about all the power that we have. Think of all that power you've got aimed in a negative way, aimed directly at yourself. So what you think and feel about yourself here is so important. This isn't about ego. Look how great I am. It's not that. It's about not hating yourself and not being negative towards yourself. It's about, you don't even have to love yourself. See, I had to get here first. It's like, okay, I know I don't love myself. I know I don't. I feel inadequate. I'm unworthy. I'm not even worthy to be here. I'm going to vanish. I don't feel that good about myself. Well, and then Tom said it one day to me. He said, well, you just got to not hate yourself. And I went, huh? And then it was just like, oh, I don't have to love myself because I'm pushing against another thing that's not real or true either. That's not how I feel. But I can get to where I don't hate myself. I can just be neutral.
Right,
Flatline.
right.
I don't feel negative about myself. I don't feel positive toward myself. I don't feel anything toward myself. I'm the caretaker of this avatar. I'm consciousness here to get rid of my fear and move through this place without getting caught up in all the hooks and stuff. And so I was able to kind of understand that the relationship between how you feel about yourself can be so caustic and it feels so bad. And most of the time, it has nothing to do with what other people are doing or what they're saying. It's about what you're doing on the inner world to yourself because it's painful. When we turn that creative energy in a negative way ourselves, it hurts worse than what anybody else out here can do to us.
Yeah, yeah. We we know our own leverage points, like we know ourselves so well that we can just push here and just really do some
Yeah.
damage to ourselves. And
Ow.
oh, right, I know it. I know it. And I love your example, by the way. I just have to comment on it because, you know, like there's this understanding that I only came to later in my life where it's like there isn't one way to think about things or do things. Like I would intellectually, I'd be like, if I can find the one way, then like I'll be able to be in control again. I'll be able to heal and be better. And it was all control stuff all over again. But I bring it up because
Yeah.
we hear in the culture like people are adamant, and I really support them in saying this. Like you have to love yourself, and it's coming from a sincere place for them. And
Yes.
it's like, it's okay, true. And everyone has to find what's, I like how you said it, like that wasn't going to be authentic for me, but
No.
right? And you just went with that. Whereas someone like me in the past, I'm like, I would feel that it's not authentic, but I would want to be in control up here. So my intellect would say, okay, I don't feel that, but I can make it authentic. And it's like, that's just not how it works. Like fountains only go one direction, geysers go up, like good luck, doing something, the opposite direction. And so,
Right.
and so
You
I
feel,
love
well,
that
I
because
love myself unconditionally. And then you feel this fountain of I hate you coming up.
just like a big, Yeah, yeah, yeah. But use potty humor, But but uh, but I love your example because you just said, like it wasn't authentic to me, so I wasn't going to do that. But I could not be negative towards myself. And then Tom gave that reflection. It fit just right. That was the puzzle piece. It was ready and wanting to happen. And boom, there it is. And that's what I so appreciate for myself. And I love your example. And I would just highlight for our audience, like just to somehow speak to folks like there is your way and you can find it. It doesn't have to be someone else's language or metaphors or their phrases or their frameworks for understanding. Like we all have our own way and it is available. Like we can find and do it. It takes a little bit of exploring, a little bit of practicing, but that being level knows it. I just know that
It
so
knows.
deeply in my heart as I speak. That being level knows what that way is. And
Mm.
as we come into relationship with who we authentically are, it's not just, you know, the kids upstairs, like that's part of our being level, but part of our being level also is this wisdom and this
Mhm.
connection with source. And
Yes.
it's like that's part of who we are as well, and it knows it has its own way. And to really, I speak with such conviction and feeling about this because I've experienced it, and
Mm.
and I know it may be hard for someone to tap into that because they haven't experienced it for themselves, but I just offer it anyway for maybe anyone that can really connect with that. Because I think your example is such a good one, and it took me forever to find that out because it wasn't something my intellect could like control and figure out. I wanted to find who's the right teacher, who's the right model, who's the right, love yourself. That's the thing. And I got value from all of that. Everything has its
Right,
place in the
right.
journey, but it finally landed for me. It's like, oh, like there's this springing forth of my way, my authenticity. What
Yes.
is how I heal? And
Your
we all
inner
got it.
wisdom can
Your inner
start
wisdom.
coming out once you start this healing process. Because,
Yes.
that house is riggedy raggedy, but also at the top of that house is a steeple where source is.
Yeah.
And we are all connected to source. And all we need to do is get rid of this, what's, rocking and rolling our house. And a lot of times it's how we see ourselves, because this really is a journey to the middle of the self. It's self-discovery journey, and it's a self-realization, and it's all an inside job, and it's all about you. It
Yeah.
really is, and how you
Yeah.
feel about yourself. And you can choose not to feel anything about yourself. You can just be neutral until you can figure out another way, because you can say you love yourself all day long, doesn't mean that you do.
Right.
you know
It's so true, and I just love how you said it. Like it's this journey to the self, this journey to who we really are in there. And it reminds me of like if we're starting out in like in a solar system, like we're out here on Pluto, and it's cold, it's dark, and it's like wow, is there any hope? It's so far away, and as we go along, there's all kinds of interesting sites and places to rest on this planet, and like in the center there, it's like even if we just touch into it for a moment, once we really connect with that sun of who we are, it's like, oh, everything changes. It's worth years of work. It didn't come quickly for me, but it's like when you touch that, it's like, oh, everything's different. When we
Mhm.
just even get the iceberg glimpse of, who we really are in a very beautiful, positive way. So I love that journey to the self, how you said it. It's so good.
It's like what was that? The journey to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop. There it is. The
Right?
journey to the center of the Tootsie Roll Pop. That's kind of what it is. And when I first started taking this journey, I didn't know I was journeying to the middle of me. I thought I was heading somewhere down the road. No, I was coming back to me and back to
Mm,
my source that is inside of us. It's an inner knowing. And that's what this fear work does, is it brings you back to you, because then you can start being more authentic with others around you. Your vibration changes, you become more loving, you more caring about others. Then your whole reality changes. The way people react to you, the way people interact with you changes, and it's a journey that's well worth taking. And when if you're making it 2023, this is going to be my thing. I'm going to get rid of my fear. Just understand that house is going to rock and roll for a minute, and it's okay. Just get comfortable with feelings of uncomfortable, and it's going to be okay, because emotion has never killed anybody. You're just feeling it. It doesn't kill you, and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I had to process through those feelings too. And as you're processing through them, every now and then you need to lay on the floor and go, oh, but it's got to be a beginning and a middle and an end, and this too shall pass. And as you start working on these, just like Nathan said, you have all these assistants just come out of the woodwork. When this system, this simulation, this simulacrum, whatever you want to call it, when it senses you're serious and you're tired of being sick and tired, and that you want to do the work, the inner work that you need to do, it will bring all kinds of help to you in your reality. It is set up to do that, because that's what happened in my life. I had a lot of help. Because when
me
I
too.
decided I was going to change, I had it coming out of the woodwork. I had a big old giant dog follow me all the way home to help me get rid of the fear. You get all this help that you need, and we're never alone, because we're all basically connected at a very deep level, at the being level. We're all connected together. We are not separate.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Oh, Cheryl, just so resonating with what you're saying, and so true for my experience as well. I would not be where I am without the system's help. All kinds of non-physical support that has been so delightful in its surprise, and physical help as well, teachers, therapists, friends, people that I have helped me along the journey. I, like you, we have gotten to where we are because of our own tenacity, of course, and also we have been so supported in so many ways outside of us. And the combination of that has been so meaningful, so
It's
meaningful.
just not as bleak as we thought it was.
Right,
And
right.
I
There's
had a
sun.
pretty rough go. I'm not gonna lie. I had a really rough go. And I was born with a birth defect. And so I had a lot of physical struggle that I had to go through with that. Um, I decided to have all the ribs of everybody. I was born with 14 ribs instead of 12. And so they were up here in my chest, and they had to take them out. So I had to have two very challenging surgeries, because they had to fix me so I could move on forward with my life. And so I know about trauma, and I've been through a lot.
Oh, that is,
So,
that
and
is,
that's
yeah.
why I know if I can do it, anybody, I'm
Hmm.
not saying anybody can do it, but when we have a lot of struggle in our world, sometimes it is that struggle that pushes us towards ourselves, where we're trying to go anyway. And it's
Yes.
just, sometimes you got to just look at it like that. It's like, God, this thing happened to me, and it's just sucked. It was horrible. But the thing about it is, if you live through it, then you can also turn it around and look at that as, one of the reasons why you are getting to yourself and getting yourself out of the trauma and out of the stuff. And I do truly believe it's like Tom says, once we do the inner work, and all the way at the being level, we become love, and we let go of the fear. We get to take that quality with us into our next life. So I'm not going to feel the way I did when I came into this life. I'm going to feel like I do now, or when I leave. And so through all of that, it's just going to make my journey, as I journey through my life simulations, going to get just better and better. I'm not going to have to go redo everything that I just did in this life, because I don't have as much fear as I did when I came in. So there's
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm
Right.
I know it's hard to look at a struggle like that as a gift and a benefit, but sometimes pain is a gift.
Yeah, and like think about that for a moment. Oh, if we cultivate our garden, like when we move to our next house, like that garden is there, it's like that doesn't work in this reality, but that's kind of how it works in some metaphorical way. Like we work hard and we cultivate beauty and
Mhm.
good things, and wow, the essence of that carries over, and
Mhm.
it's like that's just mind blowing, and it
Makes
becomes
it
a
super important, doesn't it? It makes it way more important. Because
Yeah.
if we are just a continuation, we're consciousness, like Tom says, we can't prove it, of course, because we can't get outside of consciousness to see what consciousness is. But if it's true, what Tom says, and I haven't found anything I can't find anything where he said was wrong yet. I've tried. But if he's right, and the simulation theory is the right theory, then that means that we don't die. We are immortal beings here, and that we have the opportunity to work in each life to change the next life that we're going to have. That's truly profound, you
It
know,
is. It's so profound.
because look what you're doing. You're not only changing it for you and your next life, you're changing it for all those people that are going to be around you when you come back.
Right, right. They come up to that garden, they say, "Oh, it's so beautiful." They enjoy it.
Yeah,
They think about their garden, and
let's
then
hang
say,
out
"Oh,
here.
but like your garden must have always been like this, Sharon." Like, well, let me tell you, and then there's a whole story. And I would end with this too because I totally like I've been there. I still have aspects of myself that are here. I understand when people go, "You don't understand my pain. You
Yeah,
don't understand my suffering." And it's so helpful for me and those aspects of myself, and it has been on my journey, to have examples like you and people that say, yes, listen, the trauma, the negativity, it's real, it is important, and to really honor that, and to also live lives of empowerment and positivity and healing. And I can just go through a whole litany of like teachers, actors, people that I have looked to as that example because they have been vocal about just the awful, like worst things. And you and I have been through a lot, and they've been through far worse, these other folks, and then they come through it to say,
yeah,
here's my life, like, and they're not trapped in the negativity of it. They have
no,
transformed, and they say those suffering and pain is real. They honor it, they validate it, and healing is real, ways forward is
yes,
real, positivity is real. And that
yes,
combination for me has been an alchemy that has been
yeah,
gold producing out of my lead, because I just totally get when people are like they're not ready for the positivity message. They say, I need to be heard in my suffering, and it's like,
yeah,
maybe there's something of an amalgamation or an alchemy of like, yes and yes
yes,
and like
and
we're not saying devalidation or ignoring or
right.
what is it, Pollyanna or
Pollyanna,
whatever.
yeah, no, we're not doing
Yeah,
that. We're just
yeah, and
saying
so
that that's not the end game. The suffering and trauma where you've been the whole time. It's not the end game. You can, there's another road over here. That's what we're trying to point out, because both Nathan and I have been through extreme suffering in our lives. And there is another road because we had to figure it out because we got tired of suffering even more as we went every day. So that's what we're trying to point out to help others. We're not negating your pain, and we're not saying you don't have pain and trauma. We know, we've been through it. We know that you do have pain and suffering. But what we're trying to tell you is we're trying to give you a gold nugget to tell you that you can work your way out of that pain and suffering, that there is healing, that there is a way. And it is through getting rid of your fears.
yeah, and it's possible, and it makes a real difference, and that there's support. Like when someone's really ready to say, "I'm going to do this," suddenly they're not alone in it. We have
Right.
to make, no one's going to make that choice for us. We have
Yes.
to in our own time. We can't make a fruit ripen faster than it's ready. But once that fruit
Right.
is ripe and it says, "I'm ready," then wow, like all of this other stuff shows up, and so there's support out there. There's therapists, there's teachers, there's books, there's all the good examples and real practical support that comes when we're
Yes.
saying, I have made that choice for myself. And then it's like, great, you're not alone. You had to make that choice alone, but
Yep.
you're never alone.
Yep.
And so that just the beauty of your example, that with the, I know we'll have to do these conversations more. We'll talk about how have we noticed support. That's a conversation I'd actually love to have with you. How has the support shown up in our lives? The
Oh,
right timing,
that's a good one.
synchronicity, like just to give some examples of like it
Yeah.
really is. beyond coincidence or chance that, when we're ready, like stuff shows up. It's just amazing like that. So
Yeah.
we'll have to talk about that maybe another time. Or,
Well, let's
or
let's do a talk next week about how has the support shown up for us when we set our intention to heal ourselves and get rid of our fear, and how did the support show up for us? Because they are really funny stories in there. There's a lot in there. So if you
good.
want to, we can come back next week and we can do another show if you want to, or in 2 weeks, or
I
whenever
love that.
you have time. But I think this talk today has been just wonderful, Nathan. Thank you
Oh,
so much for coming forward today. And is there anything, you want to add to, and maybe we can close this discussion out and we can start a new one?
I would love to chat again. Let's do that even next week, real soon here. And just all would only echo and add how delightful this conversation has been with you. I've really enjoyed myself. Lots of laughs, lots of just deep, meaningful sharing, and hopefully
Mhm.
something of value for folks out there. And yeah, looking forward to more.
Yes, I had a wonderful time too. It was funny when I first called you, and Nathan was like, "Well, I don't know. What we?" And I was like, "Oh no, come on, it'll be fun." Because I'm crazy. So it's like, come on, just come on over, come on to the front row seat and see what happens. Because it just kind of takes you over and off you go on this roller coaster ride, and it's really interesting and fun. And
It is.
I'm just tapping in, and whatever comes, I just let it fly, And here we are on the front row seat. And I'm so glad
Right?
that you came, and we get to do it again. And much love to you. And I sure appreciate you being here. And you are the best, Nathan. Thank you for
Well,
coming and sharing your stories with us today.
thank you, Cheryl. No, I so appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you next week then.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.